My experience of growing up and living in American society is that we are very much driven by our passions, which is to say, by our feelings. When I talk to people, they evaluate their reality and the reality of whatever they're experiencing based on their feelings. But in my pastoral experience, this does incredible harm to people. A couple examples. One, when I hear confession, people will sometimes confess, "Oh, Father, I'm not close to the Lord. I'm not doing right by the Lord. I'm not praying enough." And I might ask them, "Well, what does it look like for you to pray? What does your daily prayer life look like?" And they might say, "Well, I'm spending 20 minutes in contemplation, and I'm usually doing a rosary on my way to work, and I try to hit a daily mass once a week." And I'm like, "Okay, well, where's the problem?" And they're like, "Well, I don't feel close to the Lord." The objective reality is that person is doing right by the Lord. But the subjective reality, their feeling, is that they're not close to the Lord. And we have to be really careful with that, because the devil can also play with our emotions. Our feelings are information. We should pay attention to them, but they don't always reflect reality. We might be doing the right thing and not feel good about it, but it doesn't mean we're not doing the right thing. And I constantly have to challenge people to use their intellect to evaluate the situation and say, are you really doing the wrong thing, or do you just feel bad? At the worst end of the spectrum is something that we call scruples. Scruples in confession is where somebody constantly has the feeling of sin. They feel like they are sinning all the time. And again, as their confessor, I sit them down and I say, all right, explain to me what you're doing wrong. I'll have people confess, for example, "Father, I received the Eucharist unworthily." And like, one, we're all unworthy, but two, I've heard your confession. You did not confess a mortal sin. Which of those sins is a mortal sin? And like, well, I just feel really unworthy. Like, well, that's not the objective reality. It's tearing you down, evaluating your reality based on your feelings, rather than based on an objective understanding of what's going on. Notice when all of these people go to St. John the Baptist and they ask him, "What am I to do?" he doesn't say, "Feel better." He doesn't say, "Be really happy all the time." He gives them concrete actions, things that are in their control to do. This is kind of the second way in which I think this feelings-based approach to reality is not helping us. A lot of people today feel like their lives are out of control. Sometimes that out of control looks like a lot of depression or unhappiness. Sometimes it looks like a bunch of other stuff. But in my experience, a lot of it is because they are evaluating their life based on their feelings, and generally we do not have control over our feelings. So if my reality is based on something that I do not have control over, of course I'm going to feel like my life is out of control. What we have control over as human beings is first and foremost our will, our choices, the things that we choose to do. And then second, with almost the same amount of control, although there are these things called intrusive thoughts, second is our intellect. We have control over our will and our intellect. And following only from those, and again, not with a one-to-one correlation, because it's not always in our control, only after that come our feelings. And we really don't have control over those. So when we look at our life and we say, am I living a Christian life? Am I doing the right thing? Am I being a good person? We don't want to ask, do I feel good all the time? We want to ask, what am I doing? What are the actions that I have taken? Because the actions are in my control, even if the feelings are not. Now, I'll give you all of that for this simple reason, which is that when St. Paul tells us to rejoice in the Lord always, I say it again, rejoice, I don't want us to receive that as you have to be happy all the time. And if you're not happy all the time, you're not a good Christian. That is not what St. Paul is getting at. Because if you were, it's not in your control. You would not have control over whether you're a good Christian or not. Instead, I would encourage us to think about this, and think about Thanksgiving, and think about love, and a bunch of other things we're going to hit by the end of the homily, as habits, as virtues, rather than as feelings. I'll start with love. Growing up in Catholic school, learning the Christian faith, I felt terrible as a Christian. I felt like I could never be a good Christian. Because they talked about God being love, and they talked about how I'm supposed to love my neighbor and all of these other things. Then I can tell you, I did not have a perfectly good feeling about everybody around me every day of my life. But that was the definition of love I was given. You have to feel good about people. My approach to Christianity deepened and changed when I was finally told the truth, which is love is willing, it's choosing what is best for the person in front of me. And I said, finally, this is something that I have control over. Even if I don't feel good about the person in front of me, even if I really struggle with the person in front of me, I can choose to do what is best for them. I can make that choice. And then, having made that choice for many years now as a Christian, I can tell you the loving feeling that we want often does follow. If you make a choice enough times, if it becomes a habit in your life, if you begin to do it automatically, sometimes you then also have a loving feeling. And that's lovely. But not guaranteed. It does not define your reality. Whether you love your neighbor does not depend on how you feel. Whether you love your neighbor depends on what you do. The same thing is true of forgiveness. I talk about this in the confessional all the time with forgiveness. If we struggle with somebody, if we say, that person really hurt me, and I struggle to look them in the eye, I struggle to have any kind of happy thought about them, okay, you don't have control over that. But you can train yourself over time to respond to their thought or the thought of the sin that was done against you with a prayer rather than with vengeance. You can say, even though I feel very angry, even though the thought of that person causes me to clench my fist and grit my teeth, when I think about them, I'm going to pray a Hail Mary for them. That's in your control. You can do it. And again, I promise you, the more you do it, the more it becomes habitual. And the more the habit becomes responding to that person with prayer. And then eventually you do have a habit. You've trained yourself to respond with prayer, and that habit will often result in a better feeling. But you don't have direct control over the feeling. You have direct control over the action that you should take, and then over time it becomes natural, and having become natural, it becomes easy, and having become easy, it becomes associated with a feeling. So the last two I'd mention are the ones that are in St. Paul's letter today: thanksgiving and rejoicing. Again, these are things that you have control over, that you can make a habit, you can make a virtue. Thanksgiving, I think, is the most important of all of them. Can we wake up in the morning and make a list of the things that are blessings? Can we go to bed at night and before we go to sleep make a list of the things that are blessings? We can do it. It's an objective, intellectual exercise. I can list the things that are blessings, and I can choose to offer those back to the Lord. That's thanksgiving. You might not always feel that blessing. You might not always be exactly rejoicing in those blessings. But if you name them and you offer them, then over time it becomes habitual. And you have the habit of giving thanks every day. It becomes automatic. And because it's automatic, you're doing it all the time, often subconsciously. And once that happens, the feeling will often, though it's not guaranteed, will often follow. And I would say the same thing, finally, about rejoicing. Rejoicing in the Lord always. Rejoicing in the Lord is a category of thanksgiving. It is giving thanks to the Lord for who He is. It is turning to the Lord and saying, Lord, you are great and marvelous and magnificent. You are a creator. You are wonderful. You are the one who made me and shaped me. You are the one who knows me. You are the one who is all-powerful and yet all-merciful. Naming these different characteristics of the Lord is to give thanks for who He is. Not just what He gave us, but for who He is. That is the definition of rejoicing. And my friends, even if you do not feel great, even if you are having a hard day or a hard month or a hard season, you have the ability to rejoice. And you have the ability to give thanks. And you have the ability to offer yourselves and everything going on in your life to the Lord. If you make that choice, especially when it's hard. If you make that choice, there is great merit in it, and you will grow in it, and the Lord will multiply your efforts, and you will become habitual in these practices. I do not shy away from telling people that Christianity is incredibly difficult. We should not expect the faith to be easy. And a lot of the difficulty of Christianity is developing the discipline of the virtues, training ourselves to pray even when we don't want to, training ourselves to forgive even when it's hard, training ourselves to give thanks and to rejoice in the Lord always. It's a difficult road to hoe, but it's in your control. By the grace of God, you can do it. And if you practice it over time, you don't have to try. You just will rejoice. And you will rejoice in the Lord. And you will rejoice in the Lord always.